Welcome to Making a Murderer, Rubberducky YouTube channel. Alright, you guys, welcome back to our fourth week of doing our daily MaM reading. And we're reading the CASO Investigative Reports, pages 151 through 160. And we're going to start part 16. Page 151. Type of activity: review of telephone conversations between Steven Avery and Jody Staczkowski. Date of activity 11/08/05. Reporting officer, investigator John Dietering. Documents generated: 2 CDs of telephone conversations between Jody Staczkowski and Steven Avery. On Tuesday, 11/08/05, at 08:56 hours, I, Dietering, along with Detective Jacobs of the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, did begin to review audio conversations that were recorded in the Manitowoc County Jail between Steven Avery and Jody Staczkowski. Jody is currently incarcerated at the Manitowoc County Jail. Jacobs and I did begin to review calls placed between 10:30:05 and 11:04:05. These were calls placed to Steven's home phone number. I subsequently did make a CD copy of these phone calls, 12 in number, at approximately 12 p.m. noon on 11/08/05. The CD can be found entered into evidence regarding this matter. I also did make copies of phone conversations between Jody Staczkowski from the Manitowoc County Jail and Steven Avery that had been placed to Steven's cellular phone. These phone calls numbered 10, and a CD was made of this information on 11/08/05 at 14:25 hours. This CD can be found entered into evidence regarding this matter. The copies of the CDs that Detective Jacobs provided me were ultimately logged into the Calumet County Sheriff's Department evidence room under property tag numbers 7827 and 7828. Investigation continues. Investigator John Dietering, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 152. Type of activity supplemental report. Date of activity 11/08/05. Reporting officer Deputy Jeremy Hawkins. On 11/08/05, John Earl, Charles Cates, and Guan Zhang from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab arrived at Calumet County Sheriff's Department. The 3 barrels that were remaining at the Sheriff's Department, a barrel Deputy Mazuzak had brought back from the Avery property, and a Suzuki Samurai door, were signed over to John Earl. While John Earl, Charles Cates, and Guan Zhang were going through the barrels, I again continued logging into evidence once it arrived from the crime scene at the Avery property. I contacted District Attorney D.A. Kenneth Kratz and asked D.A. Kratz about keeping the barrels. I was advised by D.A. Kratz that the barrels from the Avery property would remain in evidence. D.A. Kratz also wanted the barrel marked number 4 that was returned to Avery property be brought back. After talking with D.A. Kratz, arrangements were made for long-term storage at the back garage of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. I was advised by the Calumet County Command Post, located on Avery property, to get some items that were brought back from the Avery's property ready for pickup by DCI agent Matthew Joy, to be transported to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, located in Madison. Property tag number 7096, a toothbrush and chapstick. Property tag number 7097, lip moisturizer and hairbrush. Property tag number 7098, a maroon case containing a vibrator sexual device. These items were repackaged in paper bags. Also gathered to be sent with DCI agent Joy to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab were 22 swabs of possible bloodstains from Sergeant Bill Tyson of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department and Deputy Dan Karcharski of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. These swabs bore property tag numbers 639-651 through 659, 7120 through 7122, 7177 through 7199, 7104 through 7105 and 8115 through 8116. A knife with a reddish-brown stain bearing property tag number 7123 that was turned over by Sergeant Tyson. A floor mat with stains and also a rag with red stain that was turned over by Deputy Karcharski was placed in the box for DCI Agent Joy to transport. Page 153. Once John Ertl, Charles Cates, and Guan Sang were finished with the 4 barrels, the barrels and the Suzuki door were signed over to my custody. The barrels were put into long-term storage area of the back of the garage. The Suzuki door was brought down and placed behind the locked cage. When DCI Agent Joy arrived at Calumet County Sheriff's Department, he stated he received a Toyota key from Deputy Kurchinski while at the scene, to be transported to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab located in Madison. I received the paperwork for the Toyota key from DCI Agent Joy. DCI Agent Joy was given a transmittal letter and also a cover letter with the items I was requested to send to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. DCI Agent Joy signed for the evidence that he came to pick up to transport to Wisconsin State Crime Lab. After the items were given to DCI Agent Joy, I continued logging items that were obtained from Avery's residence, Deputy Jeremy Hawkins, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 154. Type of activity, supplemental report, interview of Michelle J. Kinzelberger. Date of activity, 11/08/05, reporting officer, investigator Wendy Baldwin. On 11/08/05, I, Investigator Wendy Baldwin, and Investigator Gary Steyer were requested by Investigator Wiegert to make contact with Michelle Kinzelberger, who is an ex-girlfriend of Earl Avery. Investigator Steyer and I did make contact with Michelle at Washington Junior High School. She's a teacher at the school. At approximately 9:00 a.m., I made contact with Michelle J. Kinzelberger at Washington Junior High School. I asked Michelle if she could tell us about her relationship and also anything that she could recall about the Avery family members. Michelle indicated that they had met approximately 1987. She said they were together until 1989. At one point, she was engaged to him. She said they spent a lot of time at Earl's house on the weekends due to her mother not being home. She said she would accompany Earl to his cottage up north quite often. She said there was a double-story tree house behind that cabin. She said it was located approximately 150 feet behind the cabin. She said Earl did spend quite a bit time up north. She described Earl as being very abusive towards her during the time that she spent with him. She said there was a lot of violence between the brothers when they argued, as well as Earl towards her. She said Earl was not a very easy person to read, that he was a slob, messy, and did not clean up. I asked if Earl ever drank a lot or used drugs, and she said no, and stated Earl was a big coffee and soda drinker. She said she never saw him using drugs. I asked Michelle to describe Charles and anything she could remember about him. Michelle said Charles is the oldest brother of the family. She said he was married twice and was accused of raping his oldest daughter. She described Charles as being quiet and to himself and not many friends. She said he is very creepy and sneaky. She said he is very smooth talker and slick. She said Charles would try to sweet-talk females rather than using violence to get what he wanted. Michelle recalled an incident in 1988 where he attempted to force sex on her. She said it was approximately 11:00 a.m. and that she was laid down in bed. Page 155. In the greenhouse. She said Charles came into the bedroom and was trying to seduce and sweet-talk her into having sex with him. She said he was clothed and was smoking a cigar at the time. She said Charles never did have sex with her. However, he tried to sweet-talk her and persuade her into doing that. She said she did not feel very good about what had happened and had told Earl about it. Michelle said Earl had later gotten into a fight with Charles and they had been hitting each other with shovels. Michelle described Dolores as always covering up for her children when they would do things. She said after the incident, Dolores had changed the bedding and had straightened the bedroom. Michelle knew that she did this so the ashes from Charles' cigar were not there. Michelle said that at a much later time, Dolores did admit to changing the bedding because it had looked a mess. Michelle described Charles as being the main person running the business. She said he would always be there and seemed to be the boss. I asked Michelle what kind of hobbies Earl and Charles had. She said that they both did hunt and fish a lot. Michelle did indicate certain areas where Earl used to spend his time. Michelle said that the other than his brothers, Charles did not have any other friends and has spent a lot of time by himself. I asked Michelle if she could describe Steven Avery. She said she did not know much about him because he was in jail or prison during most of the time that she was with Earl. Michelle did know Steven was married to Lori, and that while they were still married and Steven was in jail, Steven had made a proposition to Earl to have sex with his wife, Lori. Michelle said at first Earl and Lori did not want to do that, but they had ended up having sex for approximately 2 years. Michelle said Earl would have been 15 when this happened and had stopped when he was about 17, which was shortly after she met him. Michelle indicated that of the brothers, she did think shortly after hearing the news that Steven may have been the one that had done this. She did state, however, after rethinking things, she thinks Charles may have something to do with it. She said it would not surprise her if Charles framed Steven. Michelle had made earlier reference to certain areas that she used to go with Earl and knew some of the areas that they used to fish. I did ask if Michelle would be willing to show us these areas, which she did. The first area that Michelle had showed us was a forest called Drall Memorial Forest, located just off of State Highway 147. Michelle said there had been an incident between her and Earl where he had pushed her down in the seat, and when she got up, they were in the forest area by the caves. She said Earl had originally forced sex on her, however, she did later consent to it. Michelle said Earl also had a fascination with an area over by Buffalo Springs. She said there had been 2 girls that had died in a car accident, and he was obsessed with that area as well as the girls that had died. She did show us that area, however. Page 156. She thought the tree was gone that he used to go by. She said he used to listen to a cassette tape that the girls were playing when they crashed their car. She also said there was an area where she had been once with a pond that wasn't far from where Earl lived. After doing some checking, we did find the area. This was located at 13803 County Highway Q. Investigator Steyer did make contact with Milton Mealy, who did sign a permission to search form. Located on that property were 3 ponds surrounding the area. This information was given to the command post for possible searching later in the day. Michelle said when she was in high school they had gone to a party at this pond. She also informed us that Charles and Earl used to do a lot of fishing on Harps Lake. Michelle said they did spend a lot of time catching crawfish, ice fishing, and fishing during the summer. She said if Earl would have done something like this, he may have taken the person to one of these areas. Michelle said Steven may have possibly taken her someplace else, however, did not know where. Michelle said if Charles had done something like this, he wouldn't have been smart enough to take the body off the property. Michelle was dropped off by her vehicle at approximately 13:30 hours. Investigator Mark Wiegert did request that I go to the Manitowoc County Clerk of Court's office to have subpoenas signed by the judge. Those included Alan Avery's Cellcom wireless phone records and Charles Avery's Sprint wireless phone records. At approximately 1400 hours, I did make contact with Honorable Judge Willis, who did sign several subpoenas for Investigator Wiegert. Those subpoenas were signed and later turned over to him. Investigator Wendy Baldwin, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 157. Type of Activity Supplemental Report. Date of Activity 11/08/05. Reporting Officer Lieutenant Kelly Sipple. On Tuesday morning, 11/08/05, shortly after 9 o'clock a.m., we were advised by a trooper that he and his fireman partner had located Teresa's auto license plates along the north border of the salvage yard. These plates would have been located in a station wagon just west of the new building. This station wagon would have been parked between the fenced-in compound to the east and an old trailer to the west. I, Lieutenant Sipple, responded to the location and made contact with Trooper Cindy L. Payne. Trooper Payne already had started taking information in regards to who had walked in and out of the crime scene. We then tarped off the area. I, Lieutenant Sipple, returned to the command post. At approximately 12:03 p.m., I took the Wisconsin State Crime Lab team back to the area where the license plates were recovered, and they began to process the scene. I again returned to the command post. Shortly after 13:40 hours on Tuesday, 11/08/05, I had the opportunity to speak with Sergeant Youst with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Sergeant Youst indicated to me there had been a large burn area behind the red garage on the Avery property, located in the northwest corner of the property. He felt that this area may not have gotten searched properly based on the fact that there was a large German Shepherd in the immediate area. I then responded to that location with him, where we took a look at the burn area. Inside the burn area, I observed a small grayish material that appeared to be bone. Sergeant Youst also pointed out a piece located in front of me and to my right, at which time I could tell that the item he was referring to appeared to be bone. He also pointed out a large piece, which was directly in front of me and to my right. This bone, from looking at it, appeared to be part of a person's spinal column. In these two items, I could observe from where I was sitting a honeycombing and their center mass. This honeycombing was familiar to me due to the fact that as a child, my parents owned a butcher shop, and at times we would burn some of the bones of the animals that were butchered. When cleaning out our own burn area, I had the opportunity to observe the same type of event happen in those bones as though I was seeing in the bones within the pit. As we were looking at these particular items, two State of Wisconsin Department of Criminal Investigation DCI agents approached our position. One individual I know as Tom Sturdivant, and the other individual is a female agent, and I do not have her name. I informed the agents that we observed what we felt were several pieces of bone. It should also be noted that prior to checking the burn area, I observed the area that had not been disturbed. It appeared that due to the previous heavy rains we had had through the weekend, that being Saturday, page 158, night, Sunday morning, where we received approximately an inch plus in rain, there was a crust over the top of the burn area, the burnt ash and materials. It did not appear as if anybody had previously dug into or moved anything within the pile. The two items that we observed were lying directly on the top. With the two agents on the scene, I then moved out of the location and advised the command post that we had possibly found some bones. Sergeant Youst remained back with the two DCI agents. When we located the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, they later returned to the location to excavate it. I, Lieutenant Sipple, went off duty at approximately 1500 hours. Lieutenant Kelly Sipple, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 159. Type of activity, contact with Detective Pete McGinty, Two Rivers Police Department. Date of activity, 11/08/05. Reporting Officer Investigator John Dietering. Documents generated, 8-page facsimile transmittal. On Tuesday, 11/08/05 at 11:22 hours, I, Dietering, while at the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, did have contact with Detective Pete McGinty, Two Rivers Police Department. McGinty indicated he had recently had contact with an individual identified as Zena D. Lavora. Ms. Lavora indicated that last year, after Avery's Auto Salvage had performed a recovery or tow for her, Charles Avery began sending her flowers and asking her to go out on dates. She stated she found this particularly disturbing. She stated she did not know Charles Avery prior to this. McGinty further stated that on 11/07/05, a subject named Judith C. Knutson had contacted the Two Rivers Police Department indicating she had had a similar situation take place regarding Charles. It should be noted that on 11/15/05, Detective Magenti did send me an 8-page facsimile transmittal. The facsimile transmittal contained written statements from Miss Lavora as well as Miss Knutson. Miss Lavora's statement is as follows. In November 2003, I was living at 916 Park Court, Two Rivers. I called Avery Auto Salvage to have 2 vehicles removed from my property. I left a message and Chuck Avery called me back. I explained to Chuck that I had 2 vehicles that needed to be towed. I was told it would be no charge. The next day, when I was home, Chuck Avery came and towed both vehicles. I contacted Chuck and pointed at the 2 vehicles needed to be towed. I then thanked Chuck for coming. A few days later, Chuck Avery called my cell phone. Chuck asked me if I wanted to go out to dinner. I said no. Chuck kept telling me he wanted to take me out. I continued saying no. Chuck had called 4 to 5 times asking me out to dinner. Each time, I said no. After these calls sometime, I returned from work to find a box of candy and a note between my screen door and inner door. The note had Chuck's name and a number on it. I later received a message on my cell phone from Chuck. Chuck asked if I got his candy and if I would go out with him. Chuck's message seemed like he was mad because I was not calling him back. About a week later, while home, I heard my doorbell ring. Before opening the door, I looked out my window and saw Chuck Avery walking away from my door and to his vehicle. I shut my door and locked it. I saw that Chuck had left a long box wrapped, page 160, in gift paper. When I opened the box, I found an envelope inside with a $100 bill. I don't remember if there was a note inside. The next day, I received another voicemail on my cell phone. Chuck's message was that by now, I should have received his gift and I should spend it on something nice. Over the next 3 weeks, Chuck called me about 6 or 7 times, continuing to ask me out. I was afraid of Avery first continuing to contact me. I told several co-workers about Chuck Avery's actions. The candy Avery left at my house, I brought to work for my co-workers to eat. I might still have the notes left at my house by Avery. If I find them, I will turn them over to Detective Magenti. This was signed by Zena Lavora. Judith C. Knutson's statement is as follows. In July of 2005, I talked to Virgil LaFlash, my supervisor, about getting a part from his brother-in-law, Earl Avery, for my Intrepid. Virgil brought part to work, and I wrote out a check for $45 for Earl Avery. After I purchased the part, my neighbor came to the door and told me that a middle-aged man in an older red station wagon went past my house very slow and took pictures of only my house from lot line to lot line. October 17, 2005, approximately 6 o'clock p.m., my car was on fire outside when notified by a man going by on his bike. TRPD and TRFD arrived. Fire put out by my ex-husband and neighbor Fritz. Car towed to Peterson's gas station in TR. Avery's were notified, and they retrieved my car for the $140 towing charge to Peterson's. October 30th, 2005, my supervisor gave me a note to call Avery's to go out to their property maybe at October 31st, 2005, to get my belongings out of my car. I didn't go because I worked overtime until 3 o'clock p.m., Federal Mogul, then realized I needed to help my son for Halloween. Thank God. Wednesday, November 2nd, I called Avery's to find out about my car and my belongings. Chuck answered the phone. He stated he had been to my house on Tuesday, November 1st, between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and he rang the doorbell and I wasn't home. I asked him if he had the wrong house, and he said no. Talked about my car, then he switched and he asked me if I would go out to dinner with him. I said, "You don't even know me." He said Virgil told him all about me, made some excuse, and got off the phone. Friday, November 4th, he stopped at my house with my belongings that he sorted from my car. Didn't call to notify me. I signed over the title to him. As he was leaving, he said, "Bye." All right, you guys, let's do our review. We're going to start on page 152. So this is a supplemental report, and this is by Jeremy Hawkins, who's the evidence custodian. And he says that 3 barrels that were remaining at the sheriff's department, a barrel, and the Suzuki Samurai doors. So we have 4 barrels because we have an and. So we have 3 that were remaining at the Sheriff's Department, and we have a barrel Deputy Mazuzek has brought back from the Avery property. Now my question is, it says here DA Kretz also wanted the barrel marked number 4 that was returned to the Avery property to be brought back. I think also wanted, and it occurring after this, means that we have 5 total barrels. So let's go ahead and erase this, and let's count, because remember we had 5 barrels. So they brought 1 back, but this one's still sitting at Avery's, and the DA Kratz wants it brought back. Now, it says here that DCI agent Matthew Joy, transported to the crime lab chapstick, toothbrush, moisturizer, hairbrush, and a maroon case with a vibrator sexual device, and that they repackaged them into paper bags. I'm not clear on this part. Why are we repackaging and relabeling consistently? Is that normal in an investigation? So then we go on to talk about 22 possible blood stains. And it was Karczynski, and who was the other one? Bill Tyson. So we'll have to follow up and see if these 22 blood stains, which ones they're talking about. But the blood stains do get turned over. But what I found most interesting is that Sergeant Tyson speaks of Deputy Karczynski handing over a floor mat with stains and also a rag with red stain. Now, Wendy Baldwin, we read, did find a rag with red stain. They don't assign a number here. There's no property tag. And where's the floor mat from? We're missing a floor mat out of the back of the cargo of the RAV4. Is this the floor mat? Why wouldn't it have got entered into evidence? On page 153, we once again are talking about the barrels. So John Ertl, which is the state crime lab, and Cates and Zing all are going through the barrels, and they've finished. Okay, so right there it tells you that they've sorted through the barrels. They're at Calumet County. They are not right here. When DCI agent Joy arrived at Calumet County Sheriff's Department, okay, they're going to the Sheriff's Department. They're talking about the Toyota key that Karczynski has found. Well, he saw them find, laying on Steve Avery's bedroom floor, that is a Toyota key. It's being transported to Wisconsin State Crime Lab by DCI, which is Department of Criminal Investigation, Agent Joy. Now, we just got a document that wasn't released in the original 300. I'm trying to remember where it came from. One of our researchers had got it from online. I believe it was one of the Reddit posts had shown this, and then I think on the MaM Marathon with Eric Cozy, I believe they had released it there. Don't quote me. I wasn't there, so I'm not sure. But this document shows us that it should, in the chain of custody, show that this key is signed over and received by somebody at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. So we have this form, and like I said, I think it came from the Mamathon. So it was given to me by an RD researcher that she had collected it from there. All right, it's the victim, which would be in this case Teresa Halbach. It is showing 12932 Avery Road, which is the residence of Steven Avery. Look at this, you guys. How many times are they going to change this and scribble it out and change it? I mean, why are they repackaging and why are they relabeling like this? It does show that it's a Toyota key, and that's what they were expecting to find, and they stopped their search immediately. But I want to move over here. So the way this works is, first, we do have the correct information. 1108, Karczynski collecting it, right? Then, on the same day, Karczynski does his job. He releases the key to Matthew D. Joy for transport to the crime lab. But where's Joy's signature? to take it to the crime lab for chain of custody to be followed. We don't have that. It just goes straight to Wiegert. So it should say here, Joy, and then Wiegert, but it doesn't. Actually, it should not say Wiegert. It should say Ertl or Colhane. So the chain of custody would be that if we did this right, let's grab a text box. For this to be correct, let's see, we'll write in red. It should then go from Joy. Oh, let's make it in red so you can see it good. There we go. It should go Officer Joy here, and then, let's see if I can push it over there. It should be the crime lab, because this is, there we go. What did I do? Oh, I wrapped it around. This is called chain of custody. So this is what's missing right here. This entire section. I don't understand how they can get away with that. So from the 11th of November until the 19th of December, we simply have Joy signing off that it went to the crime lab. But we have nobody in the crime lab signing for this key. It then gets returned to Jeremy Hawkins, who is the custodian of the evidence. Then it goes from Jeremy Hawkins up here to Jeremy Hawkins down here for identification, and it talks about 11306. Are you telling me that they didn't identify this key as the RAV key until January of 06? I'm just asking. That's what it appears to be. The next line, and we'll stretch out. You can see they've finally decided it's going to be item number 5. Wiegert then signs from here to Hawkins. It says to transport to evidence room. Where was it before it was in the evidence room? Oh, okay, so it went to Wiegert. So that would be Calumet County. So Calumet County is the one that handled the entire identification of the vehicle? What about the identification at the state crime lab? What about having an affidavit that the parents recognize that this is her key? Anything. But no, Calumet County is the one handling the identification of the key. Then we go from Mark Wiegert and Jeremy Hawkins, who takes it to evidence room. Jeremy Hawkins then releases it back to Wiegert for court. And that's 2/20/07. They just don't even try to follow the protocol. That's what's wrong with this case. So where's the key really been? Has it even been to the crime lab? I don't think so. We have the problem with when they even take the computer in, the guy only reports 8 miles in mileage when it's a 30-some mile trip to Little Chute for the computer. But he only drove 8 miles. They're rerouting this. Evidence is what it appears. It's very suspicious. I refuse to call it coincidental. I refuse to give them another oops. This is obviously not being done proper, and I feel that it's with intent. So let's continue on. We're going to go to page 154. And here we're introduced Michelle Kanzelberger, who was an ex-girlfriend of Earl Avery. She's a school teacher, and she dated approximately 2 years and was engaged to Earl. Now, we heard a little bit about that before, but this goes into a story that is just so confusing. So she talks about up north, they have a cabin. Earl has a cabin, and it's got a double-story treehouse that's about 150 feet behind the cabin. And then Earl is reported to be very abusive to her. She also reports a lot of violence between the brothers, but yet she never saw him use drugs. But when she gets into Charles, being the oldest brother, she brings up that he is accused of raping his oldest daughter, that he's very creepy and sneaky, that he would rather sweet-talk a female than using violence. But what's more disturbing than the creepy and sneaky is the raping of his daughter accused. So I'm not going to get into his rap sheet, but you can do your own research. That is not something she just speaks of that you can blow off. There's actually court documents to back up that her statement is true. On page 155, she states that Charles came into the bedroom with a cigar and attempts to have sex with her. And she says no. She reports it to Earl. And the two men, Earl and Charles, the brothers, begin hitting each other with shovels. Wow. That's pretty intense. Michelle described Charles as being the main person to run the business. She also states he seems to be the boss, that he spends a lot of time by himself. She had stated Stephen had made a proposition to Earl to have sex with his wife, Lori. Now, Earl, she states, would have been about 15, and that they did end up having sex for 2 years till he was about 17. I'm not so sure Stephen would have encouraged that. Maybe that was Earl's story to her. I'm just trying to understand the dynamics of this. Okay, so she said she would not be surprised if Charles framed Stephen. Thought that was interesting. At first she thought Stephen may have done it, but she rethought it. And she brings up that she thinks Charles would have framed Stephen. She wouldn't be surprised. She goes on to talk about something very strange. And I caught this. So for those of you that are doing a lot of tracking, we have Drawl Memorial Forest located off of State Highway 147. But this part coming up, this is strange. Earl had pushed her down in the seat, and when she got up, they were in the forest area by some caves. Does it sound like she blacked out, you guys? He pushed her down in the seat, and when she got up, they were in the forest area by some caves. Sounds like she blacked out. He then forces her to have sex, which later she consents to. Forcing someone to have sex is rape. Then she goes on to talk about 2 girls that had died in a car accident, and that Earl was obsessed with the area as well as the girls. On page 156, she states that he continually keeps listening to a cassette tape. Well, not continually, but he used to listen to the cassette tape that the girls were playing when they crashed. How did he know what music and what cassette? I mean, it listened to a cassette tape that the girls were playing, not listening to a song, listening to the cassette tape. How did he get it? Wow. This is disturbing to me, you guys. Michelle said Charles, now this is the other brother, the older, had done something like this, that she thought he would not have been smart enough to take the body off the property. Then the police, the law enforcement, Uyghur, he gets a subpoena signed by the judge, and he comes back, and out of all this, he gets the phone records between Charles, which is Chuck, and Alan. Not even Earl, but Alan Avery. Where's the subpoena for Earl's? Seriously. I'm so confused, as always. I know I have a lot of questions. Page 157. It's a Tuesday. It's the 8th. They locate Teresa's license plate. They state that it's in a station wagon just west of a new building. Now, we know the color of the station wagon is kind of a reddish color. It talks about the location being parked between the fenced-in compound to the east and an old trailer to the west. So let's go ahead and look at. Okay, you guys, I've pulled up a few pictures actually for us to review. And if you look at this one, let me grab a little box. We'll get it from the thing we were looking at earlier. We'll just copy the little box, if I can grab it. Okay, we copy that. We're going to bring it down here. We're going to use the box to be able to show you what we're talking about. All right, so this is a license plate here. Now note that this one here has a sticker on it right by it. Oh, actually the one I'm showing you doesn't. So this is front and back plate. Okay? And it was found in this vehicle down here. You can see this fence that they're talking about. You can see the new building as they're referring to it. So it's an old reddish station wagon. And then you can look up here where you can see the broken glass inside the vehicle. You can see like a bucket that's got some severe melting. Why is that bucket melted? Let's look at that. Look at that. Let me hone in on it a little bit. The side of the bucket has been melted to where it's curved in on the right side. And you can also see where it's pushed up against something that's melted it. And then, let's look at this picture. Let's go ahead and get this one back out of our way. Oh, it jumped. It jumped. There we go. When this license plate was found, it was reported to have been found folded into thirds 3 times. But yet, they take the picture of it. They've already opened it up. And they laid it back in there. You can see brush marks from where they decided to lay it back down. That's what I'm guessing is why the glass is moved. So what's interesting to me is that it's found on the very edge of the property. Now, if you live on the property and you're the killer, would you necessarily put it on the edge of your own property? Why not put it off your property completely, like get rid of it in some dumpster at McDonald's in some town like Green Bay? I just don't understand why it would be laying in one of these vehicles. That picture. Okay, we're still on page 157. We'll scroll down. So now Sergeant Youst has indicated that there is a large burn area behind the red garage, and that a large German Shepherd is in the immediate area. You guys, seriously, look at this area. Okay, I know it's a little blurry, but I needed to really make it big, and this is an aerial shot. So if you look here, we see this little red doghouse. And they're talking about a German Shepherd. A German Shepherd doesn't get a little tiny chain. They get a junkyard dog chain. And that chain is going to go around in a radius circle and kill the grass. And so is the urine and the feces of the dog. We have the doghouse. They're explaining that they find bones. What do you think Avery's gave that dog to eat? Do you think they cleared their dinner table? And they would have fed the dog all the scraps. You might have found ham bones and so forth. If he's seeing a spinal column that resembles his family who were butchers, is it possible that he's looking at an animal bone, seeing as it looks the same? Because we don't find any animal bones. We don't find any human bones in this pit. We find human bones in the Dassey burn barrel, but not in this pit. Not according to Zoner, anyway. Okay, I've scrolled ahead to 159, and we're talking about Pete Genty of the McGinty of the Two Rivers Police Department, and it's on the 8th. Now we found the license plate on the 8th, and now we found the key on the 8th. And now we're talking to Miss Lavora. Now, Miss Lavora goes on, and she states that she had a very similar situation in November 2003. And she talks, about Chuck. She had to have 2 vehicles towed. And Chuck shows over at her house. She points out the vehicles, and then he leaves. However, he doesn't leave it there. Chuck calls her 4 or 5 times asking her out to dinner. Every time she says no. He continues to try to win her over. He puts a box of candy and a note between her screen door and inner door. She gets a phone message from Chuck on her phone where she says that he seems mad because she's not calling him back. A week later, Chuck Avery is walking over to her door and and then leaves. And he leaves a long box wrapped in gift paper, probably flowers, and an envelope with $100 bill in it. Why? And that's just so strange that he would put money in it. Over the next 3 weeks, Chuck continues to call her about 6 or 7 times, asking her out. And she was getting scared because he would not quit contacting her. So then we go into the Knutson statement, which is a completely different woman. But this woman isn't from 2003. She's talking about 2005. Now, she's talking about, in July. Then we go August, September, October. So it leads right up to the day that Miss Halbach goes missing. Now listen to this closely. A middle-aged man in an older red station wagon went past my house very slowly and took pictures of only my house from lot to lot. Let's go look at what we were just looking at. What do you see in the red box? An older red station wagon. Seriously? That's where we found the license plates. So, that's very strange. I also found it interesting that the tow charge goes to Peterson. Now, I doubt that it is Peterson, Kenneth Peterson, but I just wanted to make sure you guys understood that it's Peterson Gas Company, okay? The gas station. Now, she talks about on October 31st that she was given a note to go to Avery's. This would have been the exact day that Teresa Halbach disappears. She was instructed to go there to get her belongings out of the car, but she didn't go. She called on the 2nd and to find out about her vehicle, and Charles states that he had been to her home November 1st between 1 and 2. Is that normal to continue to go to the customer's home? And then he asks her to go out for dinner with him on the phone, and she's like, "You don't even know me." Then he returns back on November 4th. He stops by her house with her belongings that he's collected from her car. Doesn't this seem like a lot of, no pun intended, well, yeah it is, bedside attention? All right, you guys, that wraps it up. But this, dang, there's a lot of info here. I feel like these brothers are just absolutely strange. The fact that both of them have sexual appetites that are not being contained with a no. They just don't seem to stop. The other thing I thought was interesting is that we go through this whole thing where Earl has this cassette. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little cold. Forgive me. He has this cassette. Where was that? Of the 2 girls that died in the accident. I'm not sure where it was, but we did read it. Where did he get that particular cassette? Why is he obsessed with the cassette? And at what point does he feel comfortable taking his date or his fiance to the place where this tree to listen to this cassette? And she reports that he's obsessed with it. This is just so strange. And then, of course, I'd love to know about this floor mat, you guys. Is that the cargo floor mat from the RAV? So, thank you so much for joining me on this week's Daily MaM Read. Wow, today's read was absolutely mind-blowing. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I'm very intrigued to continue reading this week's read. And I want to thank you for always supporting Stephen and Brendan in your public awareness, keeping them in the light. The world watching does keep the 2 individuals safe that were wrongfully convicted, have lost most of their life being kidnapped by the state of Wisconsin. And we seek every day to try to help in whatever way we can. And that's very, very much an important goal that we have. So with that, you guys, if you didn't do the crime, you shouldn't do the time. Thank you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good night.